Our Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Moscow for the first bilateral visit of his third term. He will hold talks with President Vladimir Putin in a bid to shore up ties with Russia. And some analysts speculate to offset a sway from China. The Kremlin says Mr. Modi's agenda for the next 2 days will be, quote, extensive. It will reportedly include discussions on New Delhi's trade imbalance with Moscow, as well as defense cooperation. This marks Mr. Modi's first trip to Russia since the start of Russia's war in Ukraine, which has complicated ties between the long-time partners. Moscow has deepened its relations with Beijing that have served as lifelines, both economic and diplomatic, for Russia amid Western sanctions over the ongoing conflict. During a security summit in Kazakhstan last week, President Putin described ties with Beijing as, quote, the best in history. And to help us unpack Mr. Modi's trip, we have our correspondents Ishan, Garg in New Delhi and Dasha, Chernyshova in Moscow. For us, let's start with you first, Ishan. Now, of course, this is Prime Minister Modi's first bilateral trip because he has been abroad since winning his term in office. He was in Italy for the G7 summit, but this is his first bilateral trip. Is this a coincidence that he has picked Russia as his destination?
Well, this is certainly significant, and it's also breaking away from the tradition because usually when a Prime Minister first took office, Prime Minister Modi himself, when he first took office in 2014 and then again in 2019, at the beginning of each term, he made sure to visit a neighboring country. But this time he has chosen Russia for his first official trip after becoming Prime Minister for a third time. And that sends out a message that India is looking to reinvigorate ties with Moscow, which have not really been the same since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And we are going to see that Prime Minister Modi's conversations with President Vladimir Putin are going to be held across a variety of different topics and discussions, but that's certainly going to be what analysts here are calling the unpresent dragon in the room, because a lot of these conversations might be within the context of India's relationship with China and Russia's relationship with China. Just over the past couple of days, we've seen Vladimir Putin say that Russia's relationship with China has been at its historic best when he was at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. But with India's relationship with China, we've seen that they have hit historic lows as two countries have been engaged in a border standoff for the past 3 years. Now, analysts are saying that India wants Russia to remain close to New Delhi and not become over-reliant on Beijing. It certainly doesn't want Moscow to become a junior partner within the wider Asia region. And that's perhaps the most significant issue that's going to be addressed in this trip, and that's why perhaps this trip is also important. It will also be important to see if India is able to walk this tightrope between the West and Russia, which analysts here say it's been doing successfully so far.
And thanks for that, Ishan. Let's cross to Dasha Chernyshova, who is live for us in Moscow. Dasha, we just heard Ishan there saying why this might matter to India. Now, from Russia's point of view, this might also be important because it's a chance to show that it's not just close to Beijing, it is also close to New Delhi. Also a chance to build on a very important increasingly important economic relationship.
That's right, and the Kremlin has highlighted the importance of these visits, saying that the Western countries are following and closely monitoring all the developments on this trip of the Indian Prime Minister to Russia. Now, we understand that the relations has decades-long traditions. They are important for Moscow, and they have become even more important since Russia started its so-called special military operation in Ukraine, with India becoming an even more important economic and trade partner for Moscow. So we understand that when it comes to the bilateral agenda, they will be discussing not just the level of the relationship, which is already at the strategic partnership, but also the scope where the two are holding their trade. Energy is another issue that will be on the table, as we hear from the officials on both sides. But at the same time, many analysts here in Russia are also stressing the very important role that Moscow could be playing in terms of balancing the relationship in the region. Keep in mind, this will be Narendra Modi's first visit after taking the new term, but Vladimir Putin has chosen Beijing for his first destination after being inaugurated in May. So many analysts are saying that this visit is showing that the relationship between Moscow and Beijing is not determining the relationship that Moscow has with New Delhi. A lot is on the agenda. So certainly there are issues that are both from point of view of the bilateral ties, but also internationally, and also the interesting issue that Russia has been raising over the past months, but more strongly has voiced just recently, that Russia wants to build the new security architecture in Eurasia, and certainly India is one of the partners that Moscow will be relying on while doing so.
Thanks to Ishan, Garg and Dasha, Chernyshova there, breaking this down and looking at the balance of relations in the region and internationally.